Welcome to Books Under Your Bed. I'm Melissa McCraw. Today I'm going to talk about Scott McCloud. He wrote one of my favorite books that I read while growing up, and he wrote a book that came out recently that I just read, so I'd like to talk about some of his books. The first book that he wrote that I read was Understanding Comics. It's a classic that everyone should read. I think that it should be assigned in high school. Really, it's a primer on how comics work. It's a comic itself, obviously, and uses the form of comics, explain how comics function and what comics can do. It's a brilliant deconstruction of the art form that, like I said, everyone should read. After that, I read some of his other work that are similar to this, such as Making Comics. There's another book that's about like the future of comics, and I was always waiting for his like next big fictional work and not just nonfiction. And that was The Sculptor. This is completely amazing. Probably why I think it's so good is just how sort of the comic form kind of disappears as you're reading it and you get absorbed because like each panel is crafted with such clarity that it sort of just is absorbed into the mind and you just experience the story instead of get tripped up when trying to decipher the meaning of some of the images, like can happen in a lot of comic books. This is made by a master and it's very emotionally effective, and I can't recommend it enough. Scott McCloud gives lots of talks about graphic design and interpreting images, sort of furthering on what he accomplished with understanding comics. I'm sure that one day he'll do another narrative comic, and I'm waiting for that day. But until that day comes, he collaborated with a comic book artist to do this book. This book is kind of a hybrid of a narrative comic and understanding comics and making comics. So it's aimed at sort of middle schoolers around that age, and it's about students who get together to form a cartoonist club and what sort of that means to make comics at that age and what emotional things you need to navigate to be a creative person. I was really impressed with this. This gives very practical advice and demonstrations of sort of the complicated feelings that creating comics engenders in people, such as like, what do you do when you encounter the blank page, or realize that your art isn't that good, or how do you sell comics, or what if nobody buys your comics? Just lots of insecurities that can crop up when you're making comics that you need to sort of get over if you're ever going to get to a professional place with them, or even get to a place that's satisfying creatively. I think that like any kid that's interested in making comics should read this. I think it's probably the best thing that I've seen that delves into the emotions of making comics and not just like the technical aspects of drawing or doing frames or things like that. And it does a good job of like introducing some of the more useful and interesting ideas of understanding comics. So that is my feeling about the Cartoonist Club. I finished reading it today and wanted to share about Scott McCloud because he's an amazing, clear-eyed teacher and artist that may be the person who understands comics the best out of anyone on earth, but that's my impression at least. Thanks for listening to this review today. Hopefully you'll at least read Understanding Comics if you're curious about comics. And if you want to see one of the best constructed comics that I've ever seen, read The Sculptor. A little bit about what The Sculptor is about, if you're curious, is that there's this sculptor who makes a deal that he can sculpt whatever he has in his imagination, but he will die in 200 days. And so it's about sort of making that Faustian bargain and what that means. It does a really great job of like asking questions about art and what art means to people and their ambitions. But I'll let you read it to find out where that goes. Okay, thanks again. Oh, like and subscribe. I'll talk to you later.